Welcome to part 4. If he was 58 and I was 14. This time he tries to kill me. He became so jealous that he started watching my every step and monitoring every move I made. He would just appear in places without me knowing. His behavior intensified until one particular night. I came home late from school and was at the road with my sister. At that time we had a shop at the front of our house, and on Friday evenings we would sit there to relax and enjoy the vibe. Unaware of what was about to happen, I noticed his vehicle approaching very slowly. Around the corner I saw a dim light and knew a vehicle was approaching. I was leaning on a friend's shoulder. We all lived like brothers and sisters in the community. It was just a casual gathering with my sisters and some friends. We were joking, talking, and having fun. Suddenly he came around in the car. He stopped and called me over to the vehicle. When I walked over I could see he was upset. He demanded that I get in the car. I calmly replied, "I'm just chilling with my sisters," and I told him I didn't feel like going anywhere that day. It was a Friday evening. As I mentioned before, every Friday, he would insist on taking me to his hut or shelter, or whatever he called it, a shed. That evening I decided to say no. I told him I wasn't going. He became really upset and started reminding me of how ungrateful I was and everything he had done for me. He accused me of mingling with people and was visibly angry. Because his mood was so intense, and like I said, I was a bit fearful of him, he insisted that I sit in the car. Reluctantly, I did as he said. It was a van at the time, and he began driving down the hill where we lived. He was furious, hurling insults at me. He called me degrading names like dog and bitch. He accused me of being a whore, claimed I had many men, and said I couldn't be trusted. He told me he was going to kill me because I wasn't being faithful, and then he added, "As a matter of fact, I'm going to kill both of us." He started driving recklessly down the hill. And at one point he turned the van toward the precipice, threatening to run the vehicle over with both of us inside. My heart leaped, and my life flashed before my eyes. In that moment of fear, I did the only thing I could. I tried to explain myself. I told him I was sorry, that I wasn't being disrespectful, and I lied saying I loved him very much. I assured him I was grateful for everything he'd done for me, and swore I would never talk to anyone else. My heart was breaking and every word felt like a betrayal to myself, but I had to say whatever it took to survive. It wasn't easy, it was never easy, but I kept believing that, despite everything, one day I would get through it. This became my reality. I had to accept it. This was my life and he was my man, even though he had a family of his own. I was hurting deeply. The stress consumed me. I felt disgusted, trapped, and crumbled inside. I was just a student trying to go to school, but I was being forced to live this life. Every day, I had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to catch the bus for the long journey to school. As I mentioned before, it was far, and yet I had to juggle the weight of this unbearable situation. Transportation was a challenge. I had to leave very early to get where I was going. One day, I told my mother that I wanted to change schools. I explained that by the time I got to school, I was hungry because I didn't have time to eat in the mornings. I was also extremely tired from staying up late at night and waking up so early to make the long journey. It was becoming too much for me, and I told her I didn't want to go to that school anymore. My teacher noticed something was wrong. She saw me sleeping in class frequently and kept asking why I was so tired. Eventually, I told her the truth. I explained that I lived far away, had to wake up very early, and often got home late at night. I described how many vehicles I had to take just to get to school. She looked at me with concern and asked, "Why did your mother send you so far? Why didn't she get a transfer for you?" She insisted that I needed to transfer to a closer school. With her encouragement, I left that school. However, I didn't go back the following September. Instead, I attended a class where I could wear regular clothes. I had started to feel like wearing a school uniform didn't make sense anymore. It felt like I didn't belong among the other children in uniform. I was living the life of someone much older, sleeping with men and dealing with things far beyond my years. At 16, I decided to change schools. By this time, I was beginning to feel more like a teenager, growing into myself and enjoying the small freedoms of adolescence. I transferred schools, made some new friends, and started to feel a bit different, more connected in a way. Coming from the countryside, I wasn't as exposed to the modern life my uptown classmates were living. They were familiar with so many exciting things that I had never experienced. Although I didn't open up to them about my life or situation, I played along, trying to fit in. Despite the fresh start, he began showing up at my new school. He knew what time school ended and would monitor my schedule, what time I arrived, what time I left. It was suffocating. He clung to me like a tick under my skin. I started pushing back, telling him I wasn't ready yet or needed more time. But he would never let it go, constantly reminding me how much he'd hurt me if I didn't comply. He watched me relentlessly, and I even had to keep changing my phone number to avoid him. Some of my new friends began to notice him. They started asking questions. Who is he? What's he to you? Out of fear and shame, I lied. I told them he was my dad. I was especially worried because one of my friends mentioned that her father was a police officer, and I didn't want her digging deeper into my story. It was a very serious situation with her, so I had to make it look like he was my dad even though he wasn't. At the time, I was constantly thinking of ways to get rid of this man, to escape him, and to figure out where I could go. But I felt so trapped, as if there was no way out. It felt like I was at the end of a road, and if I stepped forward, I would just fall off. There seemed to be no escape. I endured everything he asked of me, things I can't even bring myself to say but have kept buried in my heart. It was a long and painful journey. By the time I was 16, I kept telling myself, I'm getting there. I'm getting to that age where I can finally run away and go wherever I want. But he lingered around. To be honest, over time, I just started to accept everything. It became my life from the age of 14, and it's still my life now. Please join me for the next episode, episode 5, where I'll explain the rest. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.